Hello everybody. Today we are going to be discussing the murder of Danny and Kathy Freeman along with Loria Bible. So grab your drinks and let's get ready for this episode of Murder Monologue. Today I'm going to be drinking some Bombay gin. I already have some in my glass, but I'm going to pour a little bit more. That's a big glass of gin, so this one's going to take us a little bit of time. And hopefully I can drink some of this. Cheers, everybody. So, December 29th of 1999, Danny and Kathy Freeman are celebrating their daughter's birthday. Ashley, their daughter, just turned 16 and was allowed to have a friend over for a sleepover. She invited Loria Bible, her best friend, over to spend the night. Danny and Kathy lived in a mobile home in Welch, Oklahoma. The mobile home was on a piece of land, very rural area. There were very few neighbors that lived there. That night was very dark and very quiet. Ashley and her friend Loria were enjoying their time together. It got late and everyone decided that they were going to call it a night. So everyone went to bed. The next morning, a passerby on their way to work saw smoke billowing out of the Freeman's house. They called 911. They alerted the authorities. Once firefighters arrived, they extinguished the flames. They made a pretty gruesome discovery. A female body was found inside the home that was now a pile of ash in the middle of a field. By this time, the news had spread throughout the small town. I actually grew up in a pretty small town, so I know exactly how this is. If anything big happens, news spreads like crazy. You'll hear about it within probably a few hours of the actual incident. So by this time, news spread throughout the small town that there was a fire at the Freeman's house. After learning the news, Loria Bible's parents, Jay and Lorene, sped towards the Freeman's house. They knew their daughter was spending the night there, and they wanted to make sure everything was fine. Upon arriving on the scene of the fire, Jay and Lorene Bible were told by the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations that there was a female body found, but they refused to give any other information until the medical examiner arrived, which I could understand. I mean, that's definitely something you don't want to get wrong. You know, they can say, hey, there's a female body, it's probably your daughter, and then all of a sudden, if it turns out that it's not the case, I mean, you're just asking for trouble if you get that wrong. So I understand why they were, not able to give them any information or not wanting to give them any more information until the medical examiner arrived. However, 5 hours later, the medical examiner finally arrives on scene to examine the situation. I'm not sure what took so long. The medical examiner, maybe they were on other calls that they had to go finish first, but 5 hours seems to be quite extensive. But anyway, the medical examiner finally arrived. They knew the Bible family, so they told them the female body was was wearing a wedding ring, and it most likely wasn't their daughter. It was the only body that was found, so Jay and Lorene are now beginning to realize that their daughter is now a missing person. The next couple of hours for the Bibles must have been pretty excruciating. They didn't really have any information. The medical examiner's report was filed a little later that day. The report had a bombshell revelation in it. The female body that was found was indeed Kathy Freeman. However, Kathy actually died from a shotgun wound to the back of the head prior to the fire being started. Now, Jay and Lorene Bible know that their daughter, Loria, is most likely in danger from wherever she is. So she's missing along with Ashley. Kathy had a gunshot wound to her head, and they also believe Danny is missing as well. So first speculation at this point is, most likely Danny has their daughter and just killed Kathy, and now he's on the run. So at this point, Danny Freeman does become the main suspect because he and the two girls are missing. Police at this point think Danny and Kathy may have gotten into an argument. Being upset with the argument, Danny shot and killed Kathy, took the girls, and fled the scene. Locals knew Danny Freeman actually had anger issues, and there was also speculation that Danny was a drug dealer, mainly dealing with marijuana, but also dabbled in methamphetamines. So there's a lot of information coming out about the Freemans at this point that just has everybody wondering what the heck is going on. At this point in the story, though, everything seems to be adding up. The only body that's recovered is Kathy's body. At 6 p.m. on December 30th, despite there being 3 people missing, there was a murder in the house, there's still an ongoing investigation. Basically just a little over 24 hours after, the firefighters and the medical examiner gets there and discovers, Kathy was killed and there was a gunshot wound to her head. The crime scene tape is actually cut, and the police release custody of the whole incident. So they basically say, we're done here. They cut the tape, and now what is left is just a burnt down house. Police believe they actually had the whole thing figured out, and they were going to be looking for Danny Freeman and the 2 girls he took with him. Meanwhile, Jay and Lorene Bible are stunned at what they're seeing. I mean, they basically are flabbergasted that the police just released the scene already, and it's only been 24 hours. There was a murder in the house, their daughter is missing, and the police are kind of being casual about it and think they have the whole thing figured out. So meanwhile, Jay and Lorene Bible are stunned at what they're witnessing. The police just released the crime scene within hours of finding out there was a murder. Jay and Lorene still have no clues as to where their daughter might be. They're being told nothing by the police and the investigators. They are being left in the dark on any clues that may have been found in the house. This does not sit well with them, and they actually decide to take matters into their own hands, and they decided that they're going to basically become the investigators for this whole situation in hopes of obviously finding their daughter. The next morning, with new light shining on the ashes of what used to be Danny and Kathy Freeman's house, Jay and Lorene take it upon themselves to look through the rubble to see if they can find any clues as to where their daughter might be. So obviously the crime scene was released. They're free to go there and look through it if they wish. Literally within 5 minutes of being there and searching through the burnt remains of the house, they discover another body. The body had been trampled on the day before by the crime scene investigators. It was never discovered by the investigators that are trained to look at the smallest piece of evidence. This body took less than 5 minutes for Jay and Lorene to find. Lorene immediately said, "That's Danny right there. He's right there." They can tell when they found the body. When Danny's body was found, he was wearing gray sweatpants, a flannel shirt, and a white t-shirt. Jay and Lorene could actually see boot marks down the whole torso of the body from when he had been stepped on several times by the crime scene investigators the day prior. There was also a large hole in Danny's head, drawing an early conclusion that basically he too had been shot point blank range in the head with a shotgun. So Lorene called 911 to alert the authorities that they had just found another body among the ashes of the house fire. Authorities arrived back to the house and tried to resume control of the crime scene. Now, you could imagine how Lorene and Jay are feeling right now is like, you're going to try to resume control of this, but you guys are clearly incompetent because you you didn't find this body just laying here. But I think what was happening was everyone was so fixated on Kathy's body. You got to remember, this is a small town. This stuff probably doesn't happen too often as far as a murder or even a house fire that kills somebody. It doesn't happen very often just because it's such a small little town. So they actually, as soon as Kathy's body was found, I think the investigators got a little, tunnel vision and only looked at that body. They didn't actually look for other evidence in the house. And they drew a preconceived notion that Danny killed his wife and fled with the two girls. And they didn't stop to think that there could be other things happening. They should feel embarrassed that it took Lorene and Jay literally 5 minutes to find another body on the scene. It's pretty inexcusable for what happened. But the medical examiner finally concluded that after his investigation again, that Danny did indeed die from a gunshot wound before the house was set on fire. Investigators are now backtracking on their original theory that Danny killed Kathy and took the girls. The craziest part is they're backtracking on it, and now they're saying that the girls were scared and probably ran and hid somewhere and that they're still hiding. I mean, I don't understand these investigators. So they don't stop to think. They don't stop to think and look at the full picture of what happened. I mean, at this point, what a bunch of idiots. At this time, if I were the investigator, I would think of potentially 2 scenarios, maybe 3. So based on the close range gunshot wound to the head of Kathy and Danny, I would think that they either knew I would assume that they knew the person or people that killed them, because they were able to get into the house and get very close to them without really any, I guess you can't really tell from the ashes, but it doesn't seem like there was much of a struggle to get close to them. This leads me to believe that they were, the perpetrators were maybe led into the house because Danny and Kathy knew them. I would also assume the same people either killed Ashley and Loria and dumped their bodies somewhere, or Ashley and Loria are still with the killers. I would lean more towards they're still with the killers, just because why wouldn't they just throw Ashley and Loria's body in with Kathy and Danny and start the house on fire that way? So it doesn't seem plausible or logical to me. The other 2 things I thought of is Ashley and Loria, for some reason, killed Danny and Kathy and are now on the run. Without knowing the background of Ashley and Loria, though, it's very hard to come to that conclusion. But knowing Danny has anger issues, maybe there was some altercation that got out of hand and Loria and Ashley killed Danny and Kathy and got out of there because they were, afraid for their life or self-defense or something like that. But that scenario seems way less unlikely to me, and it's just something that, could possibly have happened, but probably pretty slim odds of that actually happening. The one other scenario I could think of was, Danny killed Kathy at close range and then turned the shotgun on himself, and the girls, ran for it, but that still doesn't explain why the girls would be missing. You would think they would call the police and get it figured out that way. So that's probably not a plausible thing either. So these investigators that are basically saying that, the girls Ashley and Loria are on the run and they're just scared and hiding, thinking of all the other possibilities, that one seems very unlikely. But now that the crime scene investigators are back on the scene, they continually ask Jay and Lorraine Bible to leave the area and let them conduct their investigation. And Jane and Lorraine basically have seen enough. They're like, you guys are a bunch of idiots. The stuff you're telling us doesn't make any sense. The girls didn't run, and they're not hiding. And so Jay and Lorene actually refused to leave, and they continued to sift through all the ashes and look through the house, basically with the crime scene investigators. And I would say good for them. I mean, at this point, they shouldn't leave. They now think that all of these investigators are totally incompetent to do their job. And they lost all confidence in those people, and rightfully so. So this is their daughter that's missing, and the investigators are treating it like it's just a runaway, like, juvenile that happens all the time. It's just insane. So as Jay and Lorene sifted through the ashes, they discovered Loria's car keys, her purse, her ID, and some cash. And now they've reached a different conclusion, that the girls were taken because they didn't leave on... Basically, they reached a conclusion that the girls were taken. They didn't leave on their own. If they did leave on their own, they would have taken the cash. They probably would have taken the car keys and their ID, because you're not going to get very far without those things. Also, if there was a robbery, the money would have most likely be gone. So this helps the theory that the investigators should be looking at, which is the suspects might have known Danny and Kathy. Despite the new findings that were discovered by Jane and Lorene, the investigators still failed to post the girls' details on the national database of missing children. Lorene and Jay had to actually take it upon themselves to basically put up missing person posters and begin a campaign to find Loria and Ashley. I don't know what is going on with these investigators, but I would be in jail. I would probably be punching them. I would be very physical with them, because they're basically jeopardizing any chance of finding my daughter, because they're not taking it seriously. I mean, it's just crazy. Meanwhile, further details of Danny and Kathy's life begin to emerge. So Danny Freeman has been in a year-long battle with the Craig County Sheriff's Office over the death of his son, which Ashley's brother, Shane, who was just a year older than Ashley at the age of 17. So Shane was not a role model by any means. He burglarized local houses and was on the run, living in a stolen truck when the deputies actually found him. Shane pulled a gun on the deputy that found him, and the deputy ended up shooting and killing Shane. So there was an investigation, and the officer was found to have done everything by the books, and the shooting was actually justified. But of course, Danny didn't see it that way, as that was his son that was just killed by these police officers. Because of the pending lawsuit that Danny was said to have started for the wrongful death of his son, the sheriff's office actually decided that they would step aside on this murder investigation, and they actually voluntarily underwent polygraph tests to prove that they had no part in these murders and the fire, which I guess good on them, because, you know, it takes a lot to step back and understand the situation and probably the public perspective of what's going on. And with it being such a small town, I'm sure the public knew, hey, you know, this sheriff or these sheriffs or this whole department is, you know, they were scrutinized for killing Shane, and all the public knew about it. And Danny was actually making a very big deal about it, you know, going public with his distrust of the sheriff's department and everything. So I guess it was probably best that the sheriff's department kind of bowed out of the investigation and let other counties take it over and lead the investigation on it. It kind of goes to prove that the sheriff's department was doing everything they could and had no part in the craziness of that night. they may not have seen eye to eye with Danny, but it seems like they understood that Danny was upset because they killed his son, and they kind of allowed him that and backed off. So I guess good on them for that, but their investigation skills should be a little better. This case basically went cold, and there weren't a ton of leads to go on until in early 2000, Jimmy Sutter was elected to the new Craig County Sheriff's Office position. So he was the new sheriff in town, and he actually vowed to solve the Freeman murders and find Loria and Ashley. Soon after that public announcement, confidential informants actually began coming forward. A lot of them included jailhouse snitches, and a lot of drug users, things like that, but they were all confidential informants for the police officers, and they started giving tips to the sheriff's department. But every piece of new information gathered had to do with drug dealers, meth heads, meth lab cooks in the surrounding areas, and it started to paint that picture and confirm the rumors that Danny was somehow involved with dealing drugs to the local area. Witnesses had come forward and said that they had seen the girls alive 2 days after the fire at a New Year's Eve party. This party took place at a meth house in the neighboring county. Another informant came forward and said that it was a drug deal gone bad. That same informant said the girls were abducted, drugged with meth, tied up, and sexually assaulted several times. The informant said the party was possibly at Chester Shadwick's house, about 40 miles east of Welch. One last informant came forward and said that they had seen several blonde-headed girls tied by the wrists on their knees being sexually assaulted in the home with a rock wall. It was also noted that pictures of the girls tied up were seen by a few people. So all of this stuff begins to flow in and kind of gives investigators a new breath of fresh air, and they're getting new leads to go investigate. The interesting part of all the informants that came forward was that they would say that they heard rumors, but then they would go into details of things that they heard. These informants were all in the drug business, so the rumors that they heard and the things that they heard, I'm assuming, was because they were actually part of it as well, where they were at those places. They saw for their own eyes, these two girls that were basically being tortured. And, it takes a new sheriff to come forward. And now all of a sudden these informants are talking a little bit. All of these informants are basically saying that this all took place at Chester Shadwick's house. He was well known to be a meth cook, so police began to look into him. And based on the description of the rock wall that one informant gave, they narrowed it down to say, hey, this has got to be Shadwick's house, because he had a very similar looking rock wall. They started focusing on Shadwick because of his house that fit the description. In 2001, officers searched Shadwick's house and found nothing connected with the abduction of Loria and Ashley. So this case basically went cold again. All of these informants came forward, gave this information, but the authorities couldn't really do much with it because they couldn't find anything to corroborate those stories. In the years that followed the murders and the abduction of the two girls, Jay and Lorene continued to chase lead after lead, trying to find any type of clue that might lead them to their missing daughter. At this point, the investigation had gone cold, but police were still following up on leads and rumors that they heard about. There were also several serial killers, weirdly enough, that made claims that they were the ones that killed Kathy and Danny and eventually killed Ashley and Loria as well. Every confession, so there were two serial killers that did this, and every confession was proved to be false and the convicted serial killer was just seeking fame, which is crazy to have even one do that, but to have two serial killers do the same thing. So now we're going to fast forward a little bit to December of 2017. The Craig County Sheriff's Office was doing some cleaning and found a box in a closet at the Sheriff's Department. When they opened the box and started looking through all the contents, they realized it contained critical information regarding the murders of Danny and Kathy Freeman, as well as the disappearance of Loria and Ashley. The information, come to find out, was not actually entered into the Bureau of Investigation's case file on this. The document that they found actually contained the names of Ronnie Busick, Warren Welch, who died in 2007, and David Pennington, who died in 2015, along with the names of others who may have information about the case. So investigators actually followed this up. They started interviewing Ronnie Busick as to why, his name was in these documents. So after a few interviews on Ronnie Busick, they were starting to build a case against all three men, but obviously Ronnie was the only one alive. So they were starting to build a case a little bit against him, and we're going to keep interviewing him. But I want to pause for a second and go back to this whole missing file thing. This is another ding against the investigators on this case. And, this case has now been 8 years since this file was found. And it seems like everyone is so incompetent. Everyone missed a second body in the house. They basically said that these girls ran away and were scared, and that's why they were missing. Now they lost this whole file that contains all these names of people that they needed to investigate and obviously didn't. And then they didn't even enter that information into the file for this murder. So it basically went unnoticed. By sheer luck, the Sheriff's Department was cleaning out a closet and found it. It just is total incompetence by this whole department. So back to the scene of, Ronnie Busick's name comes up in these files, and they start interviewing him and interrogating him, and they're actually starting to build a case based on all the informants that came forward as well, and what Ronnie Busick is actually telling them. So Ronnie Busick is, at this point, he's 70 years old, but he's an ex-con. So several people came forward and stated that they heard the men bragging about kidnapping the girls, and Welch told them that if they ever told anyone, he would kill them. In total, 12 witnesses claimed all three men bragged about raping and murdering Ashley and Loria. The witnesses also claimed that Busick, Welch, and Pennington took pictures of the girls when they were tied up and gagged. After all the investigations, they finally had enough evidence to arrest Ronnie Busick, the only one of the three that was still alive, for the murders of Danny and Kathy, as well as the abduction and assault of Loria and Ashley. Busick cut a deal and was sentenced to 10 years in prison, along with 5 years of probation. His possible release date is actually dependent on whether he leads police to the girls' bodies or not. It's kind of a double-edged sword for the Bible family. You obviously want your daughter's body to be found, but then that also means that this killer is probably going to walk free again. That's a hard pill to swallow. And the plea deal, so, a 10-year sentence along with 5 years of probation for what essentially is a double murder, an abduction, rape, everything seems a bit light, but I have a feeling they did it because they really didn't have enough evidence to go to a jury trial and convict him. So he took the plea deal of, 10 years at that point is really nothing. So investigators now rehash what they believe happened, and they basically make it public. So investigators now believe that Welch, Pennington, and Busick went to Danny and Kathy's house to collect a drug debt that Danny owed to Welch. Welch was carrying a shotgun under his coat. Once inside the house, Danny Freeman had a loaded .357 Magnum lying on the table, and he went for it. Welch shot Danny in the head, killing him instantly. Welch then went into the bedroom where Kathy was and killed her as well. He did not want to leave any witnesses. However, the two girls, Loria and Ashley, ran outside and hid in the field. The three men stole some drugs, some money, and kind of looted the house, and then they actually started it on fire. The girls then stood up from the field and were spotted by Busick. A foot chase ensued, and the girls eventually were caught. The girls were taken to Welch's house about 30 miles away. There, the girls were tied up, gagged, and drugged by Welch. It is believed that the girls were then assaulted and killed, and their bodies have yet to be uncovered. So the craziest part about this whole story is now that the investigators are tying all these pieces together, all the witnesses and everyone that came forward, they were actually all kind of telling the truth. They basically said that, these girls were alive, they were at a party, they were tied up and gagged and sexually assaulted. Pictures were taken of them, and all of these things that the investigators, were using the information, but they couldn't really get anywhere with it. All that information seemed to be true, and it kind of leads me to think, obviously, all these people that knew all of that, I guarantee you they had something to do with it, or they were participating. It just seems unlikely that many people would know of this situation solely because those three guys told everyone. I guarantee everyone was at that party and they all saw it happen and no one said anything. But no one can prove that, so you can't bring any charges against anyone. Laureen Bible stated, "Hopefully I get to look him right in the eye and say to him, tell me where my child is." So thank you for watching. If you like this video, I would love it if you liked and subscribed to my channel at Murder Monologue. I do have a little bit of gin left, so here goes nothing. Oh. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.